Welcome back to WWII Iowa, and on this Veterans Day we have a special episode to really tell you the story of a true Iowa icon, Glenn McDole.
Here in the heartland, this is the working man. These are the fields of dreams of American. No, you can't take that away, 'cause I wanna stay here in the heartland. Here in the heartland.
While attending Urbandale High School, Glenn McDole befriended a state trooper who would stop out at their football practice. And in visiting with this state trooper, Glenn McDole decided that one day he would like to become a state trooper. And the gentleman recommended to Glenn, well, the first thing you need to do is join the military. And the branch he also recommended was the United States Marine Corps. Shortly after joining the Corps, Glenn was sent to the Philippines. And upon hearing about the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, soon the Philippines was also under attack. And Glenn's camp would continue to hold out until May 6th, when they would surrender to the Japanese. Glenn would always say that the worst feeling in the world was seeing Old Glory coming down the flagpole. Glenn, along with several other 1,000 U.S. GIs, was sent to a prisoner of war camp. And upon seeing the atrocities that were committed during the march, it hardened Glenn and his friends. With the conditions and the death rate so high in the camp that they settled on, Glenn and his friends decided that they were going to volunteer for a large work detail to get them out of that camp and onto a new one. When they came to ask for 300 men, Glenn and his friends joined the new work detail and were soon shipped out to the island of Palawan, where they would spend the next 3 years cutting jungle and crushing coral rock to build an airstrip for the Japanese. One day while working the camp, Glenn felt a sharp pain in his side and he soon collapsed. There was an American doctor there by the name of Carlton Mango, and he soon recognized that Glenn's appendix had ruptured and that he needed surgery. Upon going back to the camp commander said that he could perform the operation, but there was no anesthesia. Glenn McDole would endure a 3-hour appendectomy with no anesthesia, and the recovery from this was very difficult. Soon infection would set in, and after several days, the doctor had recommended try not to move a whole lot and try not to drink a lot of water. Well, one night a tropical storm came and Glenn couldn't take it anymore, and he decided if he was going to die, he was going to die comfortably. And his friend Smitty brought him a canteen full of water, and upon drinking the water and rolling over on the side, the wound broke open. The next day, Dr. Mango came in, and trying to decide what to do, he looked at an old shirt of Glenn's that was hanging on the wall, and he took the buttons off that shirt, and sewing 6 buttons on each side into the good skin, he was able to lace up the wound like tying your shoe. Soon men in the camp started to hear about this, and some of the Japanese guards would come and they'd want to see buttons. And Glenn would say no. And then he would tell them in return for cigarettes, though Glenn never smoked, he would show them buttons. Well, what Glenn would do then was trade those cigarettes for a rationing of rice from another GI. This helped him get more food and helped him get back to health, and soon he was back working out on the airstrip and crushing coral rock. Towards the end of the war, soon they started to see who they called Hysterical Harry. A U.S. bomber would come by, wave the wings of the GIs, and started bombing the airstrip that was built. The next day, the GIs would go back out and they would repair the airstrip. The camp guards decided for the GIs to build about a 6-foot tunnel there to protect themselves from these bombing raids by the United States. This went on for some time, and soon the camp of nearly 300 to at one time possibly 500 prisoners of war was knocked down to about 150. And on December 14th of 1944, as the American GIs were getting closer, the siren sounded for the men to turn to their trenches. When they thought they were going to return to work, instead, the air raid went off again, and they went down into their trenches. And this is the day of the Palawan Massacre. When Glenn McDole looked out of his trench, he noticed that they had set up a perimeter, and soon the massacre was going to take place, and of the 139 men that day, only 11 would survive. Glenn McDole was one of those 11 who survived. And what they had done in their trench, they had dug a hole out the side, fearful that a bomb could possibly hit the front and they could be trapped inside there. And the men in his trench jumped out the side into what had been 3 years of the garbage dump on the side of a cliff. Upon hitting the land, he shook hands with his best friend, and off they went. Glenn caught some shrapnel. He returned to this 3-year garbage pile and burrowed himself in, where he spent the next 2 days, eventually making his way to the coral rock, where he would swim 5 miles across the point. Upon arriving there, he would run up the hill into the jungle, and there the reality of the situation set in. Fortunately for Glenn, he would stumble upon a resistant group of the Philippines. They nourished Glenn back to health, and eventually he would make his way into the Free Philippines. While in a camp in the Free Philippines, one day a submarine surfaced, and some boxes were brought ashore. And Glenn went down to help the natives to retrieve these boxes. And upon grabbing the box to pull out of the water, he noticed it was 50 caliber machine guns, and stamped on the box was Ordnance Plant, Des Moines, Iowa. Glenn would make his way to Pearl Harbor, then to Washington, D.C., and eventually home. He'd returned to Japan in 1945 to testify during the war crime trials. But Glenn's goal was to become a state trooper, and after completing his service, he achieved that goal. Glenn McDole would become a state trooper for the state of Iowa for over 30 years. After retiring from the state troopers, Glenn then went to work for Polk County Police Department and serving for an additional 12 years. All in all, 50 years of service to the military and law enforcement in the state of Iowa. Glenn peacefully passed away at the age of 88 on September 3rd of 2009. On July 12th of 2019, U.S. Senator Joni Ernst presented Glenn McDole's 2 daughters his 13 medals from his service in World War II. On this Veterans Day, the Iowa Hall of Pride is proud to thank all those veterans who have served this country. And we are also grateful for the opportunity to share Glenn McDole's story so that we may never forget. Thank you, Mr. McDole, and Semper Fi. As a reminder to all our visitors, all Iowa students have free admission to the Iowa Hall of Pride thanks to Musco Lighting.
I say the way I speak about the medal and how it's not me, and it's not. It can't be me. I know Sal Giunta. I'm an average guy. I'm mediocre. I'm simple. I'm from Iowa, and the rest of the Army. There's very few people from Iowa, that really serve in the big Army, and I'm easygoing. I have a demeanor about me, and this is not me. And it's easy to say that because I know the sacrifices that were given by the men around me. I know the trials and tribulations they had to go through. I wear this and I use the medal as my soapbox to remind the American public. The reason why we don't see the military every single day is because they're taking care of business, and they're so good at their business that they don't have to take care of it here on our soil. They take the fight to them. They go over there and they handle business elsewhere. And I think in a way we can forget that, because the only time we're going to see the soldiers now is if we turn on the news, and it's going to be positive or negative, but you can't thank them through the TV. And I like to go around and say that, because you see them passing in the airport, you see them coming home from leave, or coming home on leave, you see them preparing to deploy in some of these National Guard and Reserve units, and to think that all of those people have wrote this blank check to the United States of America that is up to and including their life is pretty incredible, when that's only about 1% of the population. 1% of the population. If there's anything I can say, it's to don't thank me. I got thanks, I feel great, I'm comfortable in what I've done, I feel fine about it, but there's people out there that truly deserve our thanks, and we see them, but we need to take that time and reach out to them and pat them on the back and tell them thank you.
For our third segment this week, we're featuring Bob Selby and Dave Bingham, 2 friends of the Iowa Hall of Pride, now hosting a sports podcast, The Sports Blanket. The Sports Blanket has you covered on all things Iowa high school football. Check out this preview to see how the Sports Blanket has you covered.
Blanket. Based off hot off the heels of the wildly successful reboot podcast #1 of the Sports Blanket, we're back for more. Those who love football always come back for more. I'm Bob Selby along with David Bingham, and we're here at the reboot version of the Sports Blanket.
#2.
It was all wildly successful, so we were very proud of that. We had a lot of fun last week, so we thought we'd try to bang one out again here tonight.
From what we saw, this is what's interesting. I was talking to somebody, and they're like, whoa, Sally's Poke killed Centennial. And we go to these games, so it's when somebody looks at a score and they talk to you, it's like, that's not how it transpired. There's a thing here, a thing there. And
tell me about your young quarterback, because the night we were there, I fell in love with him, and I thought, I want to know about his progression. This kid's sophomore, and he looks poised, and I like him.
Yeah, he's one of the youngest kids in his class. He's only 15 years old. He doesn't turn 16 until March. But he's got a lot of natural talent. If you look at the way his body has developed over the last year, just from his freshman to a sophomore year, he's grown into a younger man, and he's not done growing yet. He's a stock, and those guys are kind of big, in terms of big and fast, and they're not, they're just physical specimen type of guys. But Augie is one of the most ornery kids, because he is 15. So, like, as mature as he is, he's still very immature, and he's a riot to have around. The guy's always joking, but I've never seen a young leader like that. Andrew Mitchell is one of our best linebackers, number 31. I mean, he'll knock your head off. You know what I'm saying? And we were at a JV game the other night, not too long ago, and they were arguing over who was going to ride in the back seat on the way home.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not lying.
Yeah.
Augie won the argument. Like, he convinced he convinced the senior linebackers, the sophomore quarterback, to get in the back seat. I mean, that's what type of kid he is. But yeah, the more you're around him, the more you'll love him too. He's got it. He's got it.
To learn more about Glenn McDole's service, check out the book Last Man Out by Bob Wilbanks.